Human rights get a beating worldwide as governments use politics of fear and repression against opponents. There is a growing fear that the flu-like disease caused by the mosquito-borne Zika virus could explode into a pandemic. And the rising power of the African diaspora voice in American politics. We'll have a report. Africa 54 starts right now. Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. In its newly released World Report 2016, Human Rights Watch says governments worldwide are using the politics of fear to roll back human rights. The organization warns that dissent is being crushed and rights curtailed by both authoritarian and democratic governments. Alberto Pimiento has more.
Repression is underway, says Human Rights Watch.
What we've noticed over the last year in particular is that the autocrats of the world, the authoritarian governments, are running scared in the face of civil society.
Scared of a society empowered by social media. Countries like China and Russia, the group says, are carrying out the biggest crackdowns in recent history.
Both Putin and Xi Jinping have made an implicit pact with their people. They say, we will give you increasing prosperity, you let us govern without any real accountability. But now that the economy is in trouble, those leaders are terrified that their people will begin to protest.
Human Rights Watch says the huge influx of migrants to Europe caused by the Syrian conflict has led some right-wing European parties to spread Islamophobia. It says fears that some of the migrants might be terrorists are distracting European governments from addressing the causes of homegrown extremism.
The issue, in our view, has been the chaos, the disorganized nature of the refugee flow. That chaos has given rise to a sense that Europe has lost control of its borders. That has given rise to fears of terrorism, that ISIS would slip operatives into the refugee flow.
Yet the fight against terrorism in the U.S. and Europe also worries Human Rights Watch. It warns against calls by American lawmakers to roll back restrictions on intelligence agencies using mass surveillance techniques and criticizes some European governments for expanding monitoring powers. These measures, it says, undermine privacy rights. The report reviews 90 countries in different world regions. In Latin America, there were serious abuses, says Jose Miguel Vivanco, director of Human Rights Watch Americas Division. While the U.S. and Cuba reestablished diplomatic relations last year, Vivanco says not much has changed.
So far, the record of Cuba is exactly the same. What we need here is pressure coming from democratic governments in Latin America, as well as Europe and other regions of the world. Now that nobody could argue that the Obama administration is implementing and promoting a policy of isolation.
Also of concern, Mexico's drug cartels and corruption, abuses by the Venezuelan government against the opposition, and the possibility that Colombia's FARC guerrillas may escape justice under the terms of the peace process now being negotiated with the government. Alberto Pimienta for VOA News, Washington.
Well, for insight into the state of human rights in some of the African nations mentioned in the Human Rights Watch report, I'm joined by Maria Burnett, a senior researcher for Africa at Human Rights Watch. Maria, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now, your report says quite a number of African countries recorded a kind of a deterioration of human rights in their countries. Let's start with Burundi. How are things today as compared to the previous year?
Yeah, well, clearly the last year has been a tragedy in Burundi, and we continue to document killings. We get new reports of killings every day. It's clear there have been killings by government and state security forces, armed opposition groups, and then there are a lot of killings that are very difficult to understand who the perpetrators are. So it's a devastating situation. We have 14 civil society groups that have been ordered to stop work or their bank accounts have been frozen. We have the 4 private major radio stations that have also been shut down.
Yes. Now, in this kind of atmosphere where there's an opposition or groups that are believed to be using violence against the government, and then there is a government using, state apparatus, who is to blame for human rights violations?
Well, in this context, clearly it's the government's responsibility to protect human rights, and we hold the government accountable. It needs to be carrying out investigations into these killings, and it needs to be holding state security forces to account. But by no means does that absolve opposition groups. If they are committing crimes, they should also be investigated. Right now, though, we've seen no progress in the justice system on any of the cases that are pending before the courts.
In fact, has there been any acknowledgement that there are violations of people's rights?
Well, so far on the government side, we've seen nothing but clear refusal to accept any responsibility for the killings that have happened thus far.
Another country is Uganda, where we witnessed a number of activities around, especially campaign and political activities. How can you describe the state of human rights there?
Well, it's been an interesting year. Uganda has elections in just a few weeks. On February 18th, we've clearly been concerned about threats to free expression and free association. We've been very concerned about reports of partisan policing, about the recruitment of quote-unquote crime preventers throughout the country, and there being unregulated new ad hoc security forces. So I think for Uganda, the situation remains complicated and precarious as we get closer and closer to presidential and parliamentary elections.
Do you get the sense that the politicians really care about what anybody thinks about their activities, especially when they infringe on human rights?
I think we clearly believe governments should care, that development partners should care, and most importantly, the citizens of all these countries care. There needs to be an environment in which people can express their views about the way their country is governed. And whether that's Rwandans or Ugandans or Kenyans or anyone, everyone should have the right to express their view, and governments have to make space for that.
Politicians seem to have other priorities, right?
Well, we remain concerned about that. I would say it's one of the most notable things is that we document consistently over the last year has been threats to NGO work and free expression in East Africa.
Another country that has been of concern actually for a long time is Somalia. Does the government there have control whatsoever in the circumstances, the conditions in the country?
Well, again, it's a country that's been through a devastating tragedy, and I think the clear point on our side is that we continue to document abuses against civilians. Internally displaced people are still extremely vulnerable. Cases of sexual and gender-based violence, killings of civilians, threats to the media. The situation in Somalia remains grave and troubling, and a lot more needs to be done to turn a lot of positive government rhetoric into concrete progressive action.
What can partners, especially, countries like the United States, do to help these countries uphold human rights?
Well, I think the clear thing is that they need to stand up for the principles that they espouse. Clearly, they are important partners in the East African region, but those partners need to be encouraged to hold investigations when abuses are committed, just as Human Rights Watch argues that the United States needs to investigate abuses by government actors, whether that's CIA torture or other things. These governments in East Africa need to hold themselves accountable to their citizens and investigate abuses by security forces.
Very quickly, Kenya, for some they thought it's getting onto a good path in terms of human rights. How are things there? Very quickly.
Well, we remain concerned about Kenya as well. They're further away from elections. We see elections next year. But we're very concerned that we've seen allegations of killings and enforced disappearances in the context of counterterrorism operations that haven't gone investigated, and we continue to remain concerned about threats to the media in Kenya. We still haven't seen any accountability for the post-electoral violence that occurred in 2007 and 2008. So there's a lot more work to be done, and civil society needs space to do its part.
Well, Maria, thank you very much. We hope 2016 will be a better year.
So do we. Thank you.
Rights. Thank you. Well, Maria Burnett is a senior researcher for Africa at the Human Rights Watch. Well, former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo has pleaded not guilty Thursday as his trial got underway at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Gbagbo is facing charges of crimes against humanity linked to a post-election civil war in his country that left thousands dead in 2010. Prosecutors say Gbagbo launched the war to cling to power despite losing the presidential election to his bitter rival, Alassane Ouattara. The ICC also has a warrant for the former president's wife, Simone, on charges of crimes against humanity. She was sentenced last year to a 20-year prison sentence by an Ivorian court. Well, it's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with a look at the emerging Zika virus. Lino.
The head of the World Health Organization says the flu-like disease caused by the mosquito-borne Zika virus could spread even further in the Americas. The tropical virus is blamed for causing severe birth defects, and some governments are warning women not to get pregnant for the next 2 years. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
A laboratory in Rio de Janeiro is offering quick tests to detect the Zika virus, which can possibly cause microcephaly, leading to abnormally small heads in infants. Brazil has been the hardest hit by microcephaly birth defects. The World Health Organization has now seen close to 4,000 cases, more than 30 times higher than in any year since 2010.
Uma situação muito alarmante.
The situation is very alarming. It's an emergency situation, not only for Brazil, but all the countries affected by globalization and also by the climate and increasing temperatures.
Blood testing alone cannot predict the Zika virus. The Sangue Bom lab uses a combination of patient symptoms and blood testing to make a diagnosis.
Uma população que
We already have a generation of people hit by microcephaly who will have to live all their life with problems induced by microcephaly, which means slowness in mental and physical development.
Daniela Alves de Jesus is 21 and has recently been infected by Zika. She came back to the Sangue laboratory for a follow-up.
I couldn't even get up. I couldn't eat without help. My brother helped me eat. I couldn't even grab the fork with my fingers. It would hurt, and I ate slowly.
Zika infection.
WHO Director General Margaret Chan says the disease and the virus might spread to all countries in the Americas except for Canada and Chile.
The explosive spread of Zika virus to new geographical areas with little population immunity is another cause for concern, especially given the possible link between infection during pregnancy and babies born with small heads.
As some countries warn women not to get pregnant in the next 2 years, Chan emphasized that no causal link between Zika and microcephaly has yet been definitely proven. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
The WHO says the Zika virus may infect 3 to 4 million people in the Americas, including 1.5 million in Brazil. Now joining us live via Skype from the WHO headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, is Dr. Bruce Elwood. He's Assistant Director of the WHO. Welcome to the show, Dr. Elwood.
Good afternoon.
So first of all, we heard that the virus was discovered in 1947, but what took so long? Why are we raising the alarm now, and how deadly is this virus?
Well, we've known this virus for a long time, like you say, but during most of the 50, 60 years we've known this virus, it's been a virus responsible for a relatively mild disease and without any long-term consequences that people were aware of. What's concerning now is in Brazil, where this virus hit pretty hard earlier this year, there has subsequently been as you mentioned, your reporter mentioned, a lot of children born with small heads, or what we call microcephaly. And the question now is really, are these things related? And until we can answer that question, what precautions should be put in place, what advice to women who are seeking to get pregnant? So that's really the reason for the concern right now, is really the problem of all these babies born with small heads in one part of Brazil, and trying to understand, is this due to the virus? We know it's associated in time and space. The question is it a causal relationship? It's going to take some time to answer that question, but women need advice today.
So it's going to take some time, as you mentioned, but how realistic is it to tell women not to get pregnant? And what other ways of prevention can be enforced?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. We need to remember that for women who do get pregnant, and women are going to make decisions about when they get pregnant based on many factors, and when they do make that decision, a key thing, just good public health, is not to get bitten by mosquitoes, and even when you're not pregnant, because they can carry other viruses, dengue, chikungunya, etc. So really, it's about really reinforcing those measures that we will know will reduce the population of mosquitoes by eliminating stagnant water areas, etc., and then taking precautions to reduce the risk of you getting bitten by mosquitoes in terms of the kind of clothes you wear, the use of appropriate sprays, sleeping under bed nets. All of those things that will help reduce your exposure are going to help.
So there are no cure, according to the report we heard. What are WHO's recommendations in terms of addressing this disease?
Well, we've got recommendations at the level of the countries as well at the level of communities and obviously for individuals. I just talked about some of those recommendations for individuals and especially for women who may be pregnant or getting pregnant, certainly until the issue of causation here is an association is sorted out. So at the national level, though, what's so important is making sure there is surveillance for Zika virus, making sure there's surveillance for the kind of neurological complications that people are worried about and we're looking to understand better. Also to do the necessary research when they are happening to try and understand what's going on. There are also recommendations for how to control the population of mosquitoes to reduce that. So there are many, many things that can be done to understand the spread of the disease to reduce those risks.
Okay, Dr. Elwood, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And that was Dr. Bruce Elwood. He is the Assistant Director of the World Health Organization. That's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, Lenore, thank you very much. And be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Well, coming up, the African diaspora has a voice in the U.S. elections. Stay with us.
Science and technology, here's what's new.
What's new? Well, they're calling it the first foldable headset for movie lovers. Who's they? The Royal X Company, makers of the soon-to-be-released Royal X headset. It features a video monitor that flips out from the top and folds down to completely cover the eyes. Royal X Video boasts a contrast ratio of 10,000 to 1 and a pixel density of 3,300 pixels per square inch. The headphones provide noise cancellation up to 22 decibels. Everything you see on the headset can be adjusted, including focus and optical strength on each eye and even how far apart the eye slots are. The headset supports Wi-Fi sharing, wireless streaming, USB, and HDMI. There are a couple of downsides. The headset is pretty bulky, and you do have to carry around an external controller for the battery and the connections. Also, it's pretty expensive at $699 US. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossman.
Welcome back. As the African diaspora in the U.S. continues to grow, so does the power of its voice. Here's a look at two immigrants of African descent who have made it a priority to vote in the 2016 election, but are backing different candidates. Ramon Taylor reports.
Bakari Tanja remembers voting for just the second time in a U.S. general election. It was 2008, and then Senator Barack Obama was on the ballot. He thinks back to that historic year, and one voter in particular comes to mind. An elderly African-American woman, too feeble to walk, and who lacked transportation. Along with other volunteers, Tanja carried her to the polling station that night so she could cast her vote.
She was singing, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. It was really amazing.
Tanja came to the U.S. in 1992 with the goal of fighting racial discrimination and slavery in his native Mauritania after it became too dangerous to continue his work there. He became a citizen in 2004. He is one of an estimated 1.8 million African immigrants living in the U.S., a number that has more than doubled since 2000. Tanja votes for the Democrats because he says their party's agenda is more favorable to immigrants. This year, he plans to vote for former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, whom he describes as experienced and charismatic.
How long the United States will be waiting for another charismatic woman who will be in a position to win general elections? So, for me, this is an opportunity to break this cycle.
Unlike Tanja, Amanda Lugg came to the U.S. under favorable conditions during the 1980s, when she was simply trying to decide what to do with her life. She was born in London to a Ugandan father and a white English mother, and adopted as a 4-week-old baby. Her British accent, she says, has served her well, especially on the phone. But people are often stunned when they see her for the first time.
They've, imagining Kate Winslet walking in the room and then it's me, and we don't look that much alike.
Lugg, who became a citizen in 2004, says she does not like any of the Republican presidential candidates, whom she blames for a growing anti-immigration sentiment around the country. Instead, Lugg favors Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders for president, even though she's not convinced he'll win the Democratic nomination. She says his policies support the working class. For Lugg, 2016 is an important year. She will vote in a national election for the first time since 1979, when she voted for former Prime Minister and leader of Britain's Conservative Party, Margaret Thatcher.
It was her first time in. I didn't know. My parents were conservative. She was a woman. I thought, that's cool.
Lugg says she is determined to get it right this time. Ramon Taylor, VOA News, New York.
Well, the leather industry is booming in Ethiopia as the government offers generous incentives to producers. As Mathvan De Wolf reports from Addis Ababa, the sector is poised for rapid growth.
Not only does Ethiopia have Africa's largest livestock population, its leather is reputed to be of high quality. There are many incentives for those who wish to see the country become a leather manufacturing hub.
There's still big capacity because at the moment we are exporting 85% of our leather in terms of finished leather, not finished products. So there's a big capacity to increase if we can produce all our material into shoes and into bags and different leather accessories.
Small local factories like this one say they do not worry about foreign companies coming in, as most of their market is local.
After 3 or 4 years, we will be known in the Horn and in Africa. We hope so.
Made in Ethiopia is slowly but surely becoming more recognized around the world. This locally based high-end leather bag company is part of a new generation that is changing Ethiopia's narrative of what can be made in the country.
I think initially it was a foreign concept to kind of produce made in Ethiopia high-end products. And then as far as for my brand, we add a lot of the Ethiopian touch with it, and so that kind of gave us a bit of attention, and as well as the quality of the leather. And so the mix of that, it's perceived positively so far.
Although exports increased in past years, the government's goal to reach $500 million in leather exports by 2015 fell short. It now plans to build industrial hubs to further expand the leather sector and the Made in Ethiopia trademark. Marta van der Wolf for VOA News, Addis Ababa.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Maternity services in China brace for a mini baby boom. We'll be right back.
Monsieur Gbagbo, plaidez-vous coupable ou non coupable?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je plaide non coupable.
We are going to benefit a lot from agriculture.
It is an opportunity now for South Africans to show the ANC that they are tired of this uncertainty.
You understand?
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The spotlight was on creative music technology and trends at the Music Merchants Annual Trade Show in California. Showcasing its newest product was Israel-based tribal tools. The Cadabra is a futuristic-looking controller that allows a musician to play up to 16 instruments simultaneously and manipulate sounds generated by an external sound source. Also featured at the show is a startup Excessive E. The keyboard player puts his or her hand on the wooden surface of the controller and can manipulate it, tap it, move it back and forward or side to side, with each movement changing the sound in a unique way. Well, next up, China's abandonment of the country's one-child policy is creating a demand for maternity services. And with an estimated 3 million extra newborns expected per year, the market for experienced maternity nurses is exploding. This training center for maternity matrons near Beijing is offering refresher courses for experienced practitioners. Older women are expected to try to get pregnant to have a second child while they are still able. A professional maternity matron will perform a variety of chores in the home, including caring for the baby and mother, feeding and providing the mother up to 6 meals each day. It is a 24-hour service with a very strict timeline. Well, and finally, Thailand's Buddhist beliefs often exist side by side with animism, astrology, and black magic rituals. Child angel rabbit dolls are the latest belief, taking the country by storm. Devotees buy the infant-sized dolls and invite benevolent spirits to possess them, hoping they will bring good luck and wealth. Some say the trend reflects anxiety over Thailand's struggling economy and a tendency to turn to animist beliefs during times of uncertainty. Some owners have brought their dolls to temples for monks to instill powers in them. The doll trend has a precedent. Following a 2006 coup, some Thais turned to amulets that promise to make their owners extremely rich. And that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
This word comes from a story about negotiations and Iran's nuclear program.
There would be 6 months of negotiations on more extensive limits on Iran's nuclear program and potentially an end to the devastating sanctions. Iran says it does not want to build a nuclear bomb, but the UN Security Council wants agreed limits and strict verification.
The word verification means to confirm something, to make sure it is true.
In this story, the United Nations wants to confirm that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Inspectors could provide verification about Iran's nuclear programs.
Now, the next time you hear verification, you will know what this news word means.